Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations is meeting today to hear testimony concerning the Department of Interior's implementation of the Incident Management Analysis and Reporting System, better known as IMARS. IMARS has a long and somewhat sordid history, so unfortunately we'll only be able to scratch the surface today. DOI first contemplated adopting a department-wide law enforcement record system after the September 11th terrorist attacks, which prompted federal law enforcement partners to start sharing more information in an effort to prevent additional attacks. So in 2002, the Department of Interior began the process of adopting and implementing IMARS. A few years later, in 2006, DOI awarded a $4.4 million contract to Lockheed Martin, but somehow never came to fruition, and DOI began to look for another contractor. In 2009, the department issued a notice of its intent to sole source the IMARS contract to a Canadian company called Niche Technology. For the next 4 years, IMAR was managed by an individual who had completely fabricated his educational qualifications. He resigned from the department in 2013 after the OIG confronted him about his falsified transcripts. For years, the Fish and Wildlife Service objected to IMAR, saying the department-wide system did not meet the needs of Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement. So Fish and Wildlife Service, or FWS, has refused to participate in IMARS and is demanded to keep its legacy system called LEMAS. The highest levels of DOI leadership have allowed this absolute impasse to go unresolved for years while continuing to request taxpayer funds and pump millions into the program. Now, IMARS has been only partially deployed and is still not fully functional. With the many years in development and millions of dollars poured into the program, we are left to conclude that this is government incompetence rivaled only by the rollout of the Obamacare website. This is government waste, fraud, and abuse to the extreme and has the potential to handcuff law enforcement and cause even deeper divisions that IMARS was supposed to solve. It's clear that the highest levels of DOI and the Office of Law Enforcement and Security, or OLES, are incapable of managing this program, because over the decade-long debacle, the department has wasted tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, entrusted the development of a sensitive law enforcement database to someone with falsified credentials, possibly provided disingenuous information to the Office of Inspector General, and allowed a confrontation between the department and one of its own bureaus to fester for years without resolution. In an effort to hear both sides of the story, we asked the Department of Interior to send one witness from OLES and one witness from Fish and Wildlife Service, but the department refused in what appears to be a deliberate attempt to stonewall and deny Congress a fair and complete appraisal of the situation. I can understand why they would want to keep their internal rivalries between agency doors, but this is an institutional mess that clearly needs to be disinfected by exposure to sunshine. We should not be hearing, I don't know, and I will have to get back with you today, because the department has assured us that Mr. Humbert is and I'm quoting, is the right person to testify on behalf of the department and Bureau law enforcement programs and systems, including those of FWS, unquote. Because the administration has provided a single witness on behalf of both the Department of Interior and Fish and Wildlife Service, the record should be clear that the responses of the witness will reflect the position of the Department of Interior, all the bureaus within, and particularly the Director Ash. I hope the witness is comfortable with testifying on behalf of Director Ash, because that's the position the department has put him in for today. Mr. Humbert, the Office of Law Enforcement and Security, OLES, is responsible for developing and implementing IMARS, correct? And I know this preceded you, but DOI started working on IMARS around 2002, correct? And I know you hadn't been in your current role for very long, but who helped brief you to prepare you for your testimony today?
I had briefings from the program manager for the IMARS program,
Who is that?
and that would have been Danielle Preston,
Anyone else?
as well as law enforcement officers within OLES and other members within the department, sir.
Now, originally Kim Thorson we thought would be the person to be testifying, but she's no longer in that position. And then we found out that she has now been rehired in a different capacity. Was she available to brief you on past history of IMARS?
She was, sir.
Do you know what capacity she's in right now with DOI?
She is in the capacity as a rehired annuitant.
Okay. Now, Deputy Secretary Connor admitted in a letter to Chairman Bishop last week the DOI and the Fish and Wildlife Service have an ongoing difference of opinion regarding IMARS. We tried to invite Fish and Wildlife, but DOI said absolutely not. Do you know why they were so adamant about not allowing someone for Fish and Wildlife Service to come testify today?
I do not, sir.
Are you familiar with the OLES document somebody should be presenting? Okay, thank the clerk for presenting that. It says it's entitled IMARS Information Paper, FWS Deployment and Funding as of November 2014. And I see that the clerk had provided you with that. So are you familiar with that document?
I am, sir.
Okay. Now, in the upper left-hand corner, the OIG told us that Kim Thorson gave it to them. Do you have any idea about that, where it came from?
This, sir, was a document that was developed for a briefing that took place with, I believe, with other committee members. I think it was probably almost close to about a year ago.
Right. And again, how long have you been in your current position?
I've been in my current position, sir, for about 2.5 months.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was the director for the Office of Law Enforcement and Security.
All right. Well, this document claims that DOI is failing to comply with several different laws and directives because Fish and Wildlife refused to adopt the IMARS. Was this paper ever shared with the Solicitor's Office or with Fish and Wildlife Service, or was it just sent directly to OIG?
I don't know that this exact document was shared with the Fish and Wildlife Service or with other members, but I can tell you that information contained in this document has been shared throughout the department.
Well, it's been more than half a decade after starting the process to create a department-wide law enforcement computer system prompted by 9/11, but Faisal Ahmad was hired in 2008, obviously under the Bush administration, but apparently he fooled OLES into hiring him, believing that he had technology-related bachelor's and master's degrees. OLES then announced a sole source contract. OLES purchased the IMARS system. By this time, the department had spent about $50 million for this agency-wide system. Then there was a tip about Mr. Ahmad. The OIG investigator referred the matter to U.S. attorney and for some reason chose not to prosecute in 2012 or 2013. Today, more than a decade after the system was supposed to be in place, systems still not linked to DHS. Is the real issue before us Fish and Wildlife Service refusal to accept IMARS? Is that the real problem here from your vantage?
From my vantage point, sir, the Fish and Wildlife Service, as other bureaus, have had unique requirements for their individual law enforcement programs. What I can say is that we have worked tirelessly, as we did with the other bureaus, to address their needs and have successfully migrated 5 of the 7
It's
law
not
enforcement.
a direct answer to the question.
Sir?
It's not a direct answer to my question as to whether the bottom line problem is Fish and Wildlife's refusal to adopt the IMARS. Understand the defensive answer, they're doing everything they can, but it sure doesn't sound like it. Mr. Humbert, you know, your testimony, you indicated you retired from the Army after having been with the Criminal Investigation Command. How long were you in the Army?
A little over 21 years, sir.
And what was the highest rank?
I was a Chief Warrant Officer 3.
All right, and you know, I'm trying to figure out a parallel from your prior service, and we are grateful for your service in the United States Army. I was in only 4 years, but it's hard for me to believe that if the Criminal Investigation Command had told the U.S. Army, we're just not going to integrate into your system. We've got our own system. It works better for us. We're not using your system. Sorry, we like what we're doing. And the only feature I can find that you highlighted in your testimony for Fish and Wildlife not adopting the IMARS system was that the system they're using makes it easier to submit uniform crime reports to DOJ. I mean, I cannot imagine that you would have made it to 21 years in the Army if that were your responsibility to integrate a system compatible with what the U.S. Army had. If you were saying, yeah, but see, I gotta offer these reports to DOJ, and I like my system because it lets me submit my reports easier. I just can't imagine you'd get to 21 years. Your OER would be off the charts bad, and I just can't imagine you getting there. And so I know you're relatively new in the current position, and you've been briefed by other people about what's going on, but surely there's got to be more of a justification from Fish and Wildlife as to why they don't get with the IMARS program besides, it's easier for us to submit reports to DOJ under our current system. What have you found besides that? Surely there's something more than that.
Well, I think, sir, the migration of a law enforcement data system, particularly one that has been in place for the length of time, such as LEMAS, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch.
Oh, wait a minute. You're giving a justification that it's been in place so long when the length of time it's been in place is one of our objections. I mean, it's supposed to have gone to the IMARS system many years ago, and they're saying because we've refused to get with the program, you have to understand we've had this system for so long. Well, if they had gotten with the program from the beginning, they couldn't have that excuse because they would have already been in the IMARS system. They would have figured out how to give DOJ reports more timely and efficiently. And so I'm sorry, I can't accept the fact, look, we've been disobeying orders so long, you have to allow us to keep this system because you've let us get away with disobeying orders all this time. We're just used to disobeying orders. That is not an adequate defense to disobeying an order. Never has been, and it wasn't in the Army, and it sure shouldn't be in Department of Interior. So I'm sorry, I just can't accept that as a legitimate answer. I would like to ask, in your testimony you said the migration of users from a legacy IT system into a new system often raises questions, but this has been going on for about 14 years. I mean, how often do you have a system that takes 14 years to implement? I mean, we hadn't been into the computer age all that long to have 14 years for it to take to implement a system. And I have no problem calling out any administration, Republican or Democrat, for mistakes. Obviously, this was a horrendous mistake to hire Mr. Ahmed without properly checking out, my goodness, a guy that's fraudulent background, and he's put in charge of implementing a system that gathers data about law enforcement activities in the federal government. I mean, this looks like a massive breakdown in our security right here in Department of Interior. Have you found anything besides, these things take time, that justifies this kind of delay in getting to everybody on board with IMRs?
What I can tell you, sir, is that realizing that there has been an impasse, this matter has been elevated to senior leadership within the department to make a decision.
Senior leadership within Department of Interior or
That is
Fish
correct,
and
sir.
Wildlife?
Within
Or OLES?
Within the Department of the Interior, sir.